Samuel had seen many things in his life. He had walked through battlefields, faced storms, and survived nights when hope seemed impossible. Now, at 72, his hair silver and his back slightly bent, he moved carefully through the polished lobby of the Grand Horizon Hotel. The lobby was large and bright, filled with golden light that bounced off the marble floors. Guests bustled around with luggage and smartphones while the sound of soft music played from hidden speakers above. Samuel wore his army jacket with quiet pride. On the left side, several medals were pinned carefully, reflecting the light. They were not meant to show off. They were reminders of years of service, of battles fought, and of sacrifices made. Today, he had come to the hotel to attend a small conference for veterans. He was not looking for recognition. He simply wanted to meet old friends, share stories, and feel the warmth of company once more. As he approached the front desk, he noticed the young staff member smiling politely, handing room keys to a couple behind him. Samuel smiled back, his gentle eyes showing the patience that came with age. He reached for his wallet to show his reservation. Nearby, a group of young people was gathered in a corner of the lobby. Among them, a man named Brian stood out. Brian was tall, with broad shoulders and a way of walking that suggested he wanted everyone to notice him. His dark hair was slicked back and he wore expensive clothing. He seemed proud of his looks and even prouder of the attention he expected from others. Brian's friends laughed at something he said, and he moved through the lobby as if it was his own stage. He did not notice Samuel at first, but as the elderly man brushed past him on the way to the elevators, Brian's eyes narrowed. "Watch where you're going, old man," Brian sneered. Samuel paused for a moment. He could have turned and answered sharply, but he chose not to. Years of experience had taught him that anger rarely solved problems. He merely shook his head slightly and continued to the elevators, his steps steady. Brian's friends laughed again, enjoying his aggression. But Brian wanted more than laughter. He wanted to prove that he was in control. Without thinking carefully, he stepped in front of Samuel. "You think you can just walk by without talking to me?" Brian said, his voice rising. Samuel looked at him calmly. "I did not mean to bother anyone," he said softly. That was all it took for Brian. Anger surged in him. He raised his hand and slapped Samuel across the face. The sound echoed through the lobby. Time seemed to slow. Guests froze. Some gasped, and others reached for their phones to record what had just happened. Samuel's face turned slightly from the impact, but he did not retaliate. He straightened his back, his eyes calm, showing no hatred, only dignity. Brian's friends laughed nervously, unsure if what they saw was funny or serious. Brian, however, stood proud, chest out, feeling a strange sense of power. "See? I told you not to mess with me," Brian said loudly, smirking. Samuel touched his cheek with one hand and shook his head. "That was unnecessary," he said gently, his voice steady but firm. "I hope you learn to treat others with respect." The lobby remained tense. Some guests whispered to each other, some stared openly, and a hotel staff member hurried over, her eyes wide with concern. "Sir, please calm down. You cannot do this here," she said, looking at Brian. Brian waved her off, not used to being told what to do. "I am fine." "It is nothing," he said arrogantly, turning back to his friends. Samuel, however, did not look angry. His mind was calm, even as a small ache appeared in his face from the slap. He moved to the elevator, pressing the button slowly, his hand steady. Unbeknownst to Brian, Marcus, Samuel's son, was in the hotel as well. Marcus had followed in his father's footsteps of service, but in a different way. He had become the chief of police in their town. He was young for the position, strong and respected by everyone who knew him. Today, Marcus had come to the hotel for a conference of law enforcement leaders. He was checking emails quietly at a corner table in the lobby when he noticed the commotion near the elevators. His head lifted, and his eyes quickly found his father. His heart tightened as he saw the familiar figure of Samuel, touched by the hand of a stranger. Marcus rose immediately, moving through the crowd with purpose. He did not panic, but his mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Why would anyone dare strike his father? Meanwhile, Samuel pressed the elevator button again. The doors opened slowly, revealing the empty space inside. He stepped in carefully, holding his bag. He knew his son was nearby, but he also knew that he must handle this with calmness. Strength does not always show in force, he thought quietly. Brian continued to laugh, showing off to his friends, completely unaware that the man he had struck was not just any elderly gentleman. He had no idea about Samuel's history, or the respect he had earned over decades of service, or the authority his family commanded in the town. Marcus reached the elevators just in time to see his father step inside. He stopped outside, his jaw tight, his fists slightly clenched. His mind was calculating, thinking of the right way to handle Brian without losing control. Marcus was not a man who acted rashly. He believed in law and justice, but he also believed in protecting his family. Inside the elevator, Samuel stood straight, holding the railing lightly. He could see Marcus through the reflective metal doors. Their eyes met briefly, and Samuel gave a small nod, a silent signal that he was all right. Marcus understood immediately. He would handle the situation. He did not need words. The doors of the elevator closed slowly. Samuel leaned back slightly, feeling the small pain in his cheek, but more importantly, he felt the strength of knowing his son was nearby. Brian, on the other hand, remained at the lobby, still boasting and unaware of the storm that was about to approach. The hotel staff gathered quickly, speaking quietly among themselves. "Did you see that?" "He hit the old man," one guest whispered. Another nodded, frowning. Samuel had not reacted with anger, but the sight of him being struck left a deep impression on everyone. As the elevator doors disappeared, Marcus walked toward Brian. His presence alone caused a pause in the young man's confidence. Marcus was tall, dressed neatly in a suit for the conference, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that spoke louder than words. Brian noticed finally that this was not a man to challenge. The lobby remained tense. Guests watched silently, curious about what would happen next. Some sensed trouble, while others felt hope that justice would soon be served. Marcus moved calmly, yet with determination, his steps echoing through the polished floor. Back in the elevator, Samuel adjusted his jacket and took a deep breath. He had lived through more battles than Brian could imagine. One slap could not harm him in the way that life's challenges had shaped him. He knew his son would handle the situation wisely, and that gave him peace. Outside, Brian's laughter began to fade. He looked around and noticed the attention shifting. His friends seemed unsure, glancing nervously at him. The moment of arrogance that had filled him only moments ago began to feel smaller, as if the room itself was correcting his behavior. Marcus reached Brian and stopped a few steps in front of him. His eyes were steady, his voice calm but firm. "You assaulted a guest, sir. That is unacceptable. I suggest you come with me to the office to explain yourself," Marcus said clearly. Brian's face turned pale. He stammered, trying to respond, but no words came out. The laughter, the pride, and the bravado were gone. He had no idea who he was facing. Only now did he realize that this was not a man he could intimidate. Marcus gave him one last steady look. "Your actions have consequences," he said. Brian's friends looked at him with worry and confusion. Samuel watched from the elevator reflection, proud but calm, knowing that his son would ensure fairness without unnecessary anger. The moment in the hotel lobby had changed everything. The air felt different. Respect, dignity, and quiet strength had won over arrogance and thoughtless aggression. Guests whispered among themselves, feeling a lesson had been learned in the most unexpected way. Samuel stood quietly as the elevator doors opened at his floor. He stepped out slowly, feeling a small sting on his face, but more importantly, feeling the power of integrity, patience, and the presence of his son. He would tell the story later, not as a tale of violence, but as a reminder that courage sometimes appears in silence, and that true strength often comes from restraint. Brian could not believe what was happening. The laughter and pride he had felt moments ago in the hotel lobby were gone. Standing in front of Marcus, the young police chief, he felt a weight he had never known. Marcus did not shout, he did not threaten, yet his presence alone demanded respect. Brian swallowed nervously, trying to form words, but the right ones never came. "You will come with me," Marcus said firmly. His voice was steady, controlled, and left no room for argument. Guests in the lobby began to watch more closely. Some whispered quietly to each other, sensing that the situation was serious. Brian's friends looked at him with wide eyes. One of them whispered, "Maybe we should go." But Brian shook his head, trying to regain some control. "No, I can handle this," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Marcus motioned toward the side office of the hotel manager. "Please follow me," he repeated calmly. Brian had no choice but to obey. Every step he took felt heavy. His friends trailed behind silently, unsure if they should speak or intervene. Meanwhile, in the elevator, Samuel waited patiently on his floor. He had seen his son step into action, and he trusted Marcus completely. Samuel's mind was calm. He remembered the lessons from his army days. Discipline, patience, and dignity were stronger than anger. He looked at his reflection in the elevator mirror, smoothing the jacket over his medals, a quiet smile forming on his face. The hotel staff guided Brian and Marcus into a private office. The room was small but neatly organized, with a large window that overlooked the city streets. Marcus motioned for Brian to sit in one of the chairs, while he remained standing, observing him closely. "First, let me explain why your actions are unacceptable," Marcus began. "Assaulting a guest in a public area is a serious matter. That man, Samuel, has done nothing to provoke you. You chose to act with anger and disrespect. This is not a minor issue." Brian fidgeted in the chair, avoiding eye contact. I didn't mean to hurt him," he mumbled. Marcus nodded, but his expression did not soften. "Intentions are not enough. Actions have consequences. You must understand the impact of what you did." Brian swallowed again, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility. Marcus's calm authority made it impossible to lie, argue, or escape the truth. Outside the office, hotel guests continued to watch from a distance, some whispering about the bravery of the elderly man and the young chief who had stepped in. The story of the slap had already spread quickly in the lobby, and everyone felt the tension in the air. Back in the office, Marcus continued. "Samuel is not just any guest. He is a veteran. He has served his country with honor and courage. The respect he deserves is something you must learn to give freely to all people. Do you understand?" Brian nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand," he said quietly, the arrogance gone from his voice. Marcus paused, studying the young man. "I will not have this incident escalate further. You will apologize to Samuel in person. You will also attend a program to learn about respect, community, and responsibility. This is not optional." Brian felt a mix of shame and fear. He had never faced consequences like this before. He had often used his strength and confidence to intimidate others, but now he realized that power without respect was meaningless. Meanwhile, Marcus's mind wandered briefly to his father. He knew Samuel would not want revenge, but he also knew that letting Brian go without accountability would send the wrong message. Marcus had to balance justice and fairness, strength and restraint. He was proud of his father's composure, but he was determined to act wisely on his behalf. After a few minutes of discussion, Marcus escorted Brian back into the lobby. Samuel had already exited the elevator and was speaking quietly to a hotel staff member, giving instructions about his room. He noticed Marcus approaching with Brian and offered a gentle nod. Brian hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the crowd's gaze. Then he took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Sir," he began, his voice trembling, "I am very sorry for what I did. I should never have hit you. Please forgive me." Samuel turned to him, looking directly into his eyes. He could see the fear, the regret, and the sincerity. Slowly he extended his hand. "Apology accepted," Samuel said, his voice calm but firm. "I hope you learn from this moment and treat others with kindness in the future." Brian took the hand carefully. The simple act of forgiveness felt heavy but liberating. For the first time, he understood that true strength came not from intimidation or aggression, but from respect, humility, and courage. Guests in the lobby watched the scene with admiration. Samuel's dignity, Marcus's authority, and even Brian's willingness to admit his mistake created a powerful lesson for everyone present. The energy in the room shifted from tension to quiet respect. After the apology, Marcus spoke to the hotel staff and the guests who had witnessed the event. "Everyone here can see that actions matter. Respect, patience, and justice are important in all areas of life. Let this be a reminder that kindness and responsibility will always be noticed." Brian and his friends left the lobby quietly, a mix of shame and reflection on their faces. Marcus returned to Samuel, placing a gentle hand on his father's shoulder. "Are you all right, Dad?" he asked. Samuel smiled warmly. "I am fine, Marcus. Thank you for stepping in. You handled this perfectly." Marcus shook his head slightly. "You handled it first. Your calmness gave me the time to act wisely. I am proud of you." Samuel nodded, his eyes glinting with pride. "We must always try to teach lessons without anger. That is how we change the world, one moment at a time." The rest of the day passed with a sense of calm victory. Samuel attended his conference with grace, sharing stories of courage and wisdom with other veterans. Marcus returned to his own meetings, feeling satisfied that justice had been served, but in a way that encouraged learning and growth. Brian, on the other hand, left the hotel with a different view of life. The arrogance that had guided his actions for so long was replaced with humility. He began to understand the consequences of thoughtless behavior and the value of respect. The encounter with Samuel and Marcus had left an impression that would remain with him forever. By evening, the hotel lobby returned to its usual rhythm. Guests moved freely, laughter returned, and the music continued softly. Yet those who had witnessed the incident carried a memory of courage, patience, and justice. The story of the slap, the apology, and the lesson in dignity spread quietly, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. Samuel returned to his room, reflecting on the day. He had faced disrespect, yet he had remained calm. He had taught a lesson without anger, and had allowed his son to guide justice with fairness. It was a reminder that life's battles were not always fought with force, but with wisdom, patience, and love. Marcus checked in on his father later, making sure he was comfortable. "I will stay with you for a while," Marcus said. "You deserve peace after everything." Samuel nodded, smiling. "Thank you, Marcus. I am at peace. Today has shown me that even in moments of challenge, dignity and respect can guide us." The hotel evening continued quietly. Outside, the city lights twinkled, reflecting in the hotel windows. Inside, the small moments of courage, justice, and forgiveness had created a ripple of learning that would touch many lives. Samuel rested, knowing that his presence, combined with his son's wisdom, had made a difference. And somewhere in the city, Brian began to think differently. The world was bigger than his ego, and real strength came from understanding, humility, and respect for others. The lessons of the day were not just for him, but for anyone willing to learn from the actions of others. The hotel room was quiet, filled with a soft golden light from the late afternoon sun. Samuel sat in his armchair near the window, looking out at the city streets below. His army jacket lay folded neatly on the bed, metals glinting faintly in the sunlight. The events of the day had left him thoughtful yet calm. Life had taught him that even in moments of disrespect, dignity and patience could guide the outcome. Marcus entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to his father and took a seat across from him. "I am glad you are okay, Dad," he said softly. "Seeing you in that lobby, I realized just how much patience you have." "I could see it in your eyes," Samuel smiled, taking a sip of the warm tea. "Patience comes from experience," he said quietly. "Life does not always give us control over what others do, but it gives us control over our reactions. That is where true strength lies," Marcus nodded. "You handled Brian better than I could have imagined. I had to step in, but your calmness made it easier for me to act wisely." Samuel leaned back, reflecting. "I have faced many challenges in my life, Marcus. Battles, storms, moments of fear. And yet each time I chose restraint, I learned something new. Today was no different. Brian acted out of anger and arrogance, but he also had a chance to learn. That is what matters." Marcus looked down at his tea, thinking, "I wonder how many people actually learn from moments like this. So many choose to ignore lessons until consequences become too large to handle." "True," Samuel agreed. "But even if only one person learns, it is worth it. One act of guidance, one moment of patience can create ripples that reach far beyond what we see." Outside, the city buzzed with activity. Guests moved in and out of the hotel, carrying luggage, chatting, and laughing. Inside the room, father and son shared a quiet connection, reflecting on the lessons of the day. Later that evening, Marcus received a call from the hotel manager. "Chief Marcus," the manager said, "I wanted to thank you for the way you handled today's incident. Your professionalism and calm authority were noticed by everyone in the lobby." "Samuel is lucky to have a son like you," Marcus replied politely. "Thank you, but my father's strength made it easier for me to act properly. He deserves more credit than I do." After the call, Marcus sat in silence, thinking about the young man who had struck his father. Brian's arrogance had been apparent, but he had also shown the ability to learn when guided properly. Marcus hoped that the experience would remain with him and lead to positive changes in his life. Meanwhile, Samuel prepared for dinner. He walked slowly to the hotel dining area, taking careful steps. Guests greeted him politely, many having heard of the incident in the lobby. Samuel smiled gently at them, appreciating the quiet respect that came his way. At the dining table, Samuel's thoughts returned to his military days. He remembered how discipline, patience, and respect had guided him through difficult times. He realized that these lessons were not limited to soldiers or veterans. They applied to everyone. Whether dealing with young men like Brian, colleagues, or strangers, the principles of integrity, patience, and fairness were universal. Marcus joined him for dinner, carrying his plate carefully. "How do you feel about today?" he asked. Samuel paused, thinking. "I feel at peace. I am reminded that life's challenges can be met with calmness and understanding. I am proud that Brian had a chance to learn, but I am even prouder that you acted with fairness and restraint." Marcus smiled. "It was not easy. Seeing my father struck made my blood boil. But I remembered your lessons. Anger is natural, but acting on it blindly is never wise. I hope Brian understands that now." Samuel nodded. "He does if he reflects honestly. Sometimes the first step toward growth is realizing one's mistakes. Today, he took that step." Later, in the quiet of the hotel room, Marcus and Samuel sat together. Marcus looked at his father and asked, "Do you ever regret the choices you made in life, Dad? The battles you fought, the risks you took?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "No, Marcus. Every choice, every challenge taught me something. Even mistakes are lessons in disguise. I have learned to accept life as it comes, to face difficulties with patience and courage. That is the only way to find true peace." Marcus reflected on his father's words. He realized that courage was not just physical. It was moral, emotional, and mental. It was the ability to remain calm in the face of aggression, to act wisely when others were reckless, and to forgive when justice had been served. Meanwhile, Brian sat in his own room, replaying the events of the day in his mind. He could not stop thinking about the calm strength of the man he had struck and the authority of the young chief who had guided him. For the first time, he felt a deep sense of humility. The arrogance that had led him to act thoughtlessly was replaced with reflection. He thought about the apology he had given, the hand he had shaken, and the lesson he had received. Brian realized that respect was earned, not taken. Strength was not measured by aggression, but by restraint, understanding, and the willingness to correct one's mistakes. Back in Samuel's room, father and son prepared for the next day. They knew that life would continue, full of challenges and opportunities. But they also knew that today had created a moment of learning, a memory that would shape not only Brian, but everyone who had witnessed the event. As the evening grew darker, Samuel and Marcus walked to the hotel balcony. The city lights shimmered like stars, reflecting on the river that ran through the city. Samuel leaned on the railing, breathing in the cool night air. "You have grown into a fine man, Marcus," he said softly. "Today showed me that you not only have strength, but wisdom. You acted with fairness, courage, and care. That is more than any badge or title can give." Marcus looked at his father with quiet pride. "I learned from the best, Dad. You taught me patience, integrity, and courage. Today I only applied what you taught me. I hope Brian learns his lesson too." Samuel smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. Lessons are never wasted. Even if one person grows from this experience, it is enough. One act of guidance can create ripples far beyond our vision. The night settled around the hotel, bringing calm and quiet. Samuel rested comfortably, feeling the peace that comes from knowing he had acted with dignity. Marcus, too, felt satisfied, knowing that he had protected his father and ensured justice was served with wisdom. Meanwhile, Brian sat quietly in his room, thinking. He realized that his life needed change. The arrogance and thoughtlessness that had guided him were not the way forward. Today had given him a glimpse of true strength and respect. He vowed to reflect on the lessons he had received, hoping to become a better person. By the end of the evening, the hotel was peaceful. Guests moved quietly in the halls, unaware of the life lessons that had unfolded earlier. Samuel and Marcus shared a quiet bond, strengthened by the events of the day. They had faced disrespect, yet they had chosen patience, dignity, and fairness. And somewhere in the city, a young man named Brian began to understand the value of humility, respect, and responsibility. The incident at the hotel was no longer just a moment of anger. It had become a lesson in courage, patience, and moral strength. As the night deepened, Samuel closed his eyes, Feeling the quiet joy of a life lived with integrity, Marcus sat nearby, thinking of the future, knowing that the lessons of today would remain with all of them. The world was full of challenges, but it was also full of opportunities to act with courage, fairness, and wisdom. The next morning, Samuel woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. The events of the previous day were still fresh in his mind. He sat by the window, sipping his tea slowly, feeling the quiet strength of having acted with patience. The slap, the apology, and the calm resolution had left him thoughtful. Life had once again shown him that dignity and understanding could guide the hardest moments. Marcus joined his father shortly after, carrying a small tray with breakfast. "Good morning, Dad," he said, setting the tray on the table. "Did you sleep well?" Samuel nodded, smiling. "I slept peacefully. There is a certain calm that comes after doing the right thing. You helped today, Marcus. I am proud of you." Marcus sat down across from his father. "I am glad you are okay. I also think Brian will remember today for a long time. I hope he chooses to change." Samuel took a bite of bread and considered his words. Change is not easy, but it begins with one honest decision. He apologized and he realized the consequences of his actions. That is a start. We must hope he follows through with understanding and respect. Meanwhile, Brian had left the hotel quietly that morning, carrying a heavy weight in his mind. He could not shake the memory of Samuel's calm dignity or Marcus's steady authority. He walked down the street feeling as if the world looked different. His arrogance had been replaced by reflection. For the first time, he felt responsible for his actions, not just for himself, but for the impact they had on others. At work, Brian avoided his usual bravado. He spoke more politely to his colleagues and listened carefully when they shared their thoughts. The lesson from the hotel lingered in his mind. Respect, humility, and restraint were not just words. They were actions he needed to practice. Back at the hotel, Samuel and Marcus prepared to leave. They packed their belongings slowly, enjoying the quiet moments together. Marcus could see the satisfaction in his father's eyes. Samuel had faced disrespect, yet he remained calm and composed. That strength, combined with Marcus's action, had turned a negative moment into a lesson for many. "Shall we go, Dad?" Marcus asked. Samuel nodded. "Yes, it is time. But remember, Marcus, today is a reminder that our actions always matter. We leave impressions on others whether we realize it or not." They checked out of the hotel and the staff greeted them warmly. Many of the employees had witnessed the previous day's events and expressed their respect for both Samuel and Marcus. Samuel smiled, appreciating their kind words, while Marcus remained humble, knowing that justice had been served with wisdom rather than anger. Meanwhile, Brian returned home and reflected on his actions once more. He realized that change required consistent effort. He began planning small ways to improve his behavior. He would apologize to others if necessary, listen more carefully, and act with respect. The hotel incident had shaken him, but it had also opened his eyes to the value of humility. Days passed and Brian began to notice small improvements in himself. His relationships with friends and colleagues became calmer and more positive. He learned to control his temper and to think before acting. It was not an instant transformation, but the memory of Samuel and Marcus guided him like a quiet compass. Back in town, Samuel returned to his daily routine. He visited the Veterans Community Center, sharing stories of courage, patience, and respect with others. He spoke of the importance of dignity in the face of challenges and reminded everyone that true strength comes from calmness, understanding, and moral courage. Marcus continued his work as police chief, balancing responsibilities with care and fairness. The incident at the hotel had strengthened his belief in teaching lessons with guidance rather than fear. He worked with his team to ensure that justice was fair, clear, and thoughtful. One afternoon, a few weeks later, Brian returned to the hotel, this time on his own. He walked through the lobby feeling nervous but determined. He wanted to show respect, not just to Samuel, but to the lessons he had learned. He asked the front desk if Samuel was still in town. To his relief, he was. Brian approached Samuel with a calm and humble demeanor. "Sir, I wanted to thank you again," he said. "Not just for accepting my apology, but for showing me what real strength and dignity look like. I have been reflecting on my actions and trying to be a better person." Samuel studied Brian carefully. He could see the change in the young man's eyes, the honesty and sincerity that were now present. "Thank you for saying that," Samuel replied gently. Change is not easy, but recognizing the need is the first step. Continue to act with respect and you will grow in ways you cannot yet imagine. Brian nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. I will do my best. I want to be someone who others can respect, not fear. Marcus, who had joined them quietly, smiled at both men. Brian, it is not just about respect. It is about responsibility, patience, and learning from mistakes. Today, you are taking another step in the right direction. Keep walking that path. Brian looked at Marcus and Samuel, feeling inspired. I understand. Thank you for guiding me without anger. That is something I will never forget. The hotel lobby seemed brighter that day, filled with a sense of calm and understanding. Guests passed by, unaware of the personal growth unfolding in the corner. Yet the lesson of humility and reflection was as strong as ever. Over the next few weeks, Brian continued to change his behavior. He helped friends who were struggling, listened to people's stories, and acted with kindness and respect. The lesson from Samuel and Marcus guided him in daily life. Even small actions became meaningful as he learned to think beyond himself. Samuel noticed the changes in Brian when they met again at a local veterans event. He smiled quietly to himself, seeing that patience and dignity could inspire change in others. He spoke to Marcus later, saying, "It is remarkable how one incident can teach so many lessons. Patience, integrity, and calm strength can reach far beyond our own expectations." Marcus agreed. Yes, Dad. It is proof that guiding others with wisdom is always better than acting in anger. Brian's transformation is a clear example of that. The community began to take notice of Brian's behavior as well. People commented on his improved attitude and respect for others. Slowly, he became a positive example for his peers. The hotel incident, once a moment of conflict, had turned into a story of learning, growth, and understanding. Samuel and Marcus continued their work and daily routines, but the memory of the hotel lobby and the lessons it created remained with them. They knew that courage, patience, and respect were powerful tools in shaping not only individuals but entire communities. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Samuel and Marcus sat on the porch of their home. The sky was painted with warm colors and the air was calm. Samuel looked at his son and said, "Life is full of moments that test us. Today, tomorrow, or years from now, these moments will come. But if we act with patience, dignity, and fairness, we leave a mark that lasts longer than anger or pride ever could." Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of his father's words. And that mark can guide others just like it guided Brian. A single act of wisdom can create a ripple far beyond what we see. Samuel smiled. Exactly. It is not just about ourselves. It is about the lessons we leave behind, the respect we show, and the integrity we carry in every action. That night, the town rested peacefully. Samuel and Marcus knew that their actions had made a difference. Brian, too, had begun to change, understanding that respect, humility, and responsibility were keys to true strength. The events of the hotel lobby had transformed a moment of conflict into a lesson of life that would continue to inspire those who witnessed it. And so, the story of courage, patience, and understanding continued, not just in the hotel lobby, but in the hearts of those who learned from it, reminding everyone that strength comes from wisdom, and change is possible when guided by respect and integrity. Weeks passed since the hotel incident, but the story of Samuel, Marcus, and Brian had quietly spread across town. People spoke about it with respect and curiosity. Some said it was a story of justice. Others said it was a story of patience and forgiveness. But everyone agreed that it was a story worth remembering. Samuel continued to live his peaceful life. He spent his mornings at the Veterans Center, where he helped younger men and women learn about discipline, respect, and courage. He often shared his experiences, not as a tale of pride, but as a lesson in understanding. His calm voice and wise words left a strong impression on everyone who listened. One day, while Samuel was speaking at the center, he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Brian. He looked different from before. His posture was respectful, his eyes clear, and his smile genuine. He sat quietly among the audience, listening with interest and humility. After Samuel finished his talk, Brian approached him and said softly, "Sir, I wanted to thank you again. I have changed a lot since that day. I started helping at the community shelter, and I joined a local group that teaches young people about respect and self-control. I finally understand what real strength means." Samuel looked at him with kindness. "I am glad to hear that, Brian. Change is never easy, but it is always worth the effort. What you are doing now shows growth. Remember, life is not about how many times we fall, but how we rise after each fall." Brian nodded. "You are right. I used to think being strong meant showing power. Now I know it means showing respect and patience. Your example and your son's actions taught me that." Samuel smiled warmly. "Then the lesson was not wasted. You have chosen a better path. Keep walking it with honesty and kindness." As they spoke, Marcus entered the center. He had come to meet his father for lunch. When he saw Brian, he paused for a moment, surprised but pleased. He walked over and shook Brian's hand firmly. "It is good to see you again," Marcus said. "I have heard you are doing well." Brian smiled. "I am trying my best. What happened at the hotel changed me. It made me think about who I was becoming and who I wanted to be. I will not waste the second chance I was given." Marcus nodded. "That is what matters. Everyone makes mistakes, but few have the courage to admit them and grow from them. Keep proving that you have learned, not with words, but through your actions." Brian agreed and thanked both men again before leaving. Samuel watched him go, feeling proud. It was rare to see someone truly change for the better, and it brought him peace to know that his calm response had guided that change. Over the following months, Brian's efforts became more visible. He organized small community cleanup drives, helped with youth training programs, and even began visiting schools to talk about respect and self-control. His message was simple but powerful. He shared his own mistakes and explained how one wrong action could hurt others deeply. He spoke about Samuel and Marcus, though not by name, describing how they showed him the meaning of dignity and patience. People began to respect Brian for his honesty and growth. He was no longer known as the man who caused trouble at the hotel. He became known as the man who changed for the better. The same people who once avoided him now worked alongside him with admiration. Samuel and Marcus often heard about his progress through the community. They never sought credit for his transformation, but they felt a quiet sense of pride knowing that something good had grown out of a painful moment. One day, the mayor of the town decided to honor several citizens who had contributed positively to the community. Among them were Samuel and Brian. The event was held in the town hall, and the seats were filled with residents eager to celebrate the people who made a difference. When Samuel's name was called, he stood and walked to the stage with calm grace. The mayor handed him a medal and said, "For your lifetime of service, for your strength, and for the dignity you continue to show, we thank you, Mr. Samuel." The audience applauded warmly. Samuel bowed his head slightly and said, "I have simply lived by the lessons I learned long ago. Respect and patience can guide us through anything. I only hope that my example can remind others to act with understanding, even when facing disrespect." After Samuel stepped down, Brian's name was called. He walked to the stage, feeling nervous but grateful. The mayor smiled as he handed him a certificate. "For your efforts in rebuilding trust, guiding the youth, and promoting respect, we honor you, Mr. Brian." The audience clapped again. Brian turned to face them and said, "I stand here today, not because I was perfect, but because I learned from my mistakes. Some months ago, I acted in anger and disrespected someone who deserved only kindness. That day changed my life. I realized that respect, patience, and humility are the true signs of strength. I am thankful to those who taught me this without anger or revenge. Their example gave me the chance to become better." As he spoke, Marcus and Samuel watched from their seats. There was pride in their eyes, not for the attention or praise, but for the honesty and growth that stood before them. They knew that this was the true meaning of justice and compassion. When the event ended, many people came to shake hands with both Samuel and Brian. The story of the hotel incident had now become a story of hope and transformation. Parents began sharing it with their children. Teachers used it as an example of moral strength, and the community carried its lesson forward. Later that evening, Samuel and Marcus sat quietly on their porch watching the stars. The night air was cool and the world seemed calm. Marcus broke the silence. It feels good to see how everything turned out. What started as a painful moment became something meaningful for so many people. Samuel nodded. That is how life works. Every challenge carries a lesson and every mistake can lead to growth. What matters is how we respond to it. Patience and dignity always open the door to understanding. Marcus smiled. You always know the right thing to say, Dad. Samuel chuckled softly. Experience teaches us what books cannot. I have seen anger destroy, but I have also seen kindness heal. The world needs more people who can choose calm over rage. A gentle breeze passed by, carrying the quiet sounds of the night. The porch light glowed softly around them. Samuel looked at his son and said, Remember this, Marcus. True strength is not in power, but in character. You showed that at the hotel. You handled everything with control and wisdom. I am proud of you. Marcus looked down for a moment, humbled by his father's words. I just followed what you taught me. You faced disrespect with grace. That taught me what real courage looks like. They sat together for a while longer, watching the peaceful sky. Somewhere in town, Brian was probably doing the same, reflecting on his journey and the choices that had led him there. The hotel incident had become a memory, but its lesson continued to live on. It was a story that reminded everyone that no matter how far a person may fall, they can rise again through understanding, respect, and humility. As the stars shone brighter, Samuel closed his eyes for a moment and whispered, Every act of patience plants a seed of change. Marcus nodded silently, knowing that his father's words were true. And far away, in the hearts of many, that seed had already begun to grow. It was not just a story of a slap or an apology. It was a story of transformation, justice, and forgiveness. A story where strength came from calmness and kindness healed what anger had once broken. And that, above all, was the legacy Samuel and Marcus would leave behind.